Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our Exploring the 8 Wastes webinar presented by John Zahara from Integrated Facility Solutions. There's a couple of housekeeping items that I'd like to go over before we get started. The first is that this is being recorded. A copy of the recording and the slide deck will be available to you. The second is that this is available for CM Lean and AIA continuing education credits, but they are self-report. So all attendees will be receiving a certificate of attendance when we send out the recording and a copy of the slide deck. You'll notice the long skinny box on the right-hand side of your screen. There's a red arrow to the left of that box. That's the minimization and maximization arrow. So please feel free to use that throughout the presentation so you can view the presentation more closely. You'll also notice the questions box at the bottom as we go through the presentation. Please feel free to put any questions you have in that box. They'll be answered at the end of the presentation. This is also going to be a very interactive presentation. We have a few polls throughout the presentation, so be thinking of those answers, or be sure that you pay close attention to the presentation so you can get those as you're going through. So just a quick recap. This is being recorded. A copy of the recording and the slide deck will be sent to all attendees, as well as a certificate of attendance. So you'll be able to self-report for those AIA and CM Lean credits. You'll notice the long skinny box to the right-hand side of your screen with the minimization and maximization arrow. Feel free to put any questions you have in that questions box as we go through. And this is a very interactive webinar, so be sure to pay close attention to the webinar so you'll be able to answer those polls as they come up. And without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to John. Thanks, John.
Eileen, thank you. And good morning to everyone who is participating in the United States, and good afternoon or maybe good evening to those that are presenting outside the United States. I know we have a large contingent from the LCI Cutter team, and I just wanted to thank you for joining as well. So today we're going to talk about the 8 wastes of construction. And when we talk about waste, we're not talking about concrete materials that get thrown in the garbage or anything like that. We're talking about a much higher level of detail. And so we're going to go through that today. We're going to give some real world examples that I've experienced myself. And hopefully you get a lot of takeaways, a lot of good takeaways that are really based on just common sense and experiences that you'll see are probably things you see in your everyday life, not just in your work habits, but also in your personal life. And so hopefully that there's a bunch of things that we can all take away from this. I'm always continuing to learn about new ways to see waste and eliminate it from my life. I've been reading a book recently called The Daily Stoic, and you're talking about Stoic philosophy that is 2,000 plus years old. And even in that book, then they're talking about elimination of waste and being aggressively looking at waste and cutting it out of your life. So interesting that this is a theme that has carried through human society for thousands of years. And so it's always something important to focus on and be mindful of. So with that, let's get into the presentation. I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. John Zahara. I am a CCM and lead AP. I'm the vice president of a company called Integrated Facility Solutions. We are an owner's representative in the Chicago area in Illinois, and we mainly manage healthcare construction projects, mostly as a owner's rep or program manager. And so we look at delivering projects from the client's point of view or perspective. Again, the idea of waste elimination is very important when it comes to healthcare construction or any construction in general. And so part of our core philosophy is to look at this and try to eliminate waste. We have what we would call a small wins program, where we look at how can we look just at minute changes to our work habits and the work habits of those that are on our project sites, and how can we deliver that savings back to our clients. And it accounts for millions of dollars a year that we can help save our clients. When we really get to know their business and work with trusted partners, we can save our clients millions of dollars by looking at waste, elimination of waste, and picking up small wins. And it's really a philosophy and mindset that we try to permeate down through our entire organization. I am the vice leader of the Chicago Community of Practice. I've been involved with LCI for the last 6+ years. I have presented nationally at LCI and other conferences on the concepts and ideas of lean construction. Those that know me personally know that I talk about this at length every day. So it's something that I live and breathe and am really passionate about. And hopefully that comes through on today's presentation. You'll see that. Here's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn, whichever way you guys want to do that. I'm open and here as a resource for you. So I'd love to have this conversation continue outside of today's presentation. So we're going to talk about the 8 wastes. I'm not necessarily going to read the slide to you, but I think what we want to do is talk about how it's relevant in the construction industry, in our design industry, and really just in our entire lives. And this talks about a video. I had to take the video out just because of the fact that as we're sharing screens across the country and everywhere else in our new day and age here, we can't really show a video, but I did take screen captures and will point out to you in a very clear methodology how and why we could see waste and how it can be reduced very simply. And one of the ways that I like to do this is I like to talk to the frontline staff that's actually doing the work. And one of the most simple questions you can ask people is, what will I do? What can I do to make your job easier? And it's not easier in the sense of like not having to do the work, because we still have to do the work, but it's easier in the sense of how can I help facilitate making good decisions, and how can I help facilitate bringing materials and information to the workers in a much more positive way. As Eileen said, continuing education credits are self-reporting and are available for this presentation. So we have our first poll question, and I like to start off with this one in every presentation I do, because it really talks about how satisfied are you or dissatisfied are you with your project processes and outcomes. And I think it's very important to understand why we talk about this, because number one, it gauges the hundreds of people that are doing this. And the other fact is it kind of helps me lead to, where are we at in our project life cycles and in our construction industry as a whole. And I think we'll be surprised at what the outcomes are when the answers roll in here. I think the poll's open now, Eileen.
Yes, it is. The poll is open now.
Okay.
We have some front runners here, so we'll be able to see what's going on there. John, when you thought about this the first time that you did it, what was your answer to this? I'm just curious. Your personal answer
I think
about
I was
your
in
project.
Anyone that is anywhere along their journey is probably in the category of either A, B, or C. And that's why we're here. So, normally when I run this poll, 75% of the people are either in the A, B, or C category, and that's where I was. That's probably where we're always, if we're very satisfied with our project outcomes, we're probably, in a way, fooling ourselves a little bit, because this idea of continuous improvement then doesn't exist, because we got it perfect and we don't need to change it. One of the things we hear a lot in the construction industry or in any industry is, well, this is how I've always done it, so this is how I'm going to keep doing it. But that doesn't really fold into the philosophy of continuous improvement. So if I'm very satisfied with what I'm doing today, I can actually probably do it better tomorrow, and that's what we need to continue to learn. So it'll be interesting to see where the front runners are here.
All right, so it turns out, I'm going to share the poll results, that there's not necessarily a front runner anymore. So 30% were somewhat dissatisfied, 28% were somewhat satisfied. Oh, sorry, and I put those together because those were two together. But we also had 31% that were neutral. But I wanted to put those somewhat dissatisfied and somewhat satisfied together just so you could see how close they were. Only 8%.
So we're in the middle.
Yeah. Only 8% said very dissatisfied, and 3% said very satisfied.
Good. Okay. So, it tells us that we're in this middle area, which kind of makes sense. one of the polls I did recently, and now it wasn't for an LCI group, and I asked the same question, and about 75% of the people were in the very dissatisfied, somewhat dissatisfied, or neutral. So maybe what we're seeing is the fact that because we're here, because we're part of LCI, we are becoming more satisfied with what we're doing. And that makes sense. I mean, that's really the whole goal of this thing, is to really move the needle forward and to become more satisfied with our projects. Going back to a project I ran 10 plus years ago, it was a guaranteed maximum price project. We didn't use the lean language yet. But we talked about coming to work every day and being happy and pleased with what we were doing. We wanted to run the project as a team aspect. And so if we take that mindset and fast forward to today, we're still doing the same thing. Now we've added in many layers of lean language into that, but really the ultimate goal is we want to have good outcomes when we show up to work every day. No one wants to be miserable. And so I like the fact that we're somewhere in the middle of this category of somewhat satisfied, neutral, and somewhat dissatisfied. It tells us that we have work to do, but we are improving. Excellent. Okay. So here's that idea of journey to mastery. And no one in the lean world would tell you that they are a master of really probably anything when it comes to lean. Because we know that there is this idea of continuous learning. I mentioned it before, and it's like you're pushing this ball uphill and you're doing it all the time. I look at it as I like this graphic, and I like the representation of the fact that we're always moving up a hill. And when I talk about it within my own teams in my own company, I talk about adding guardrails on the top and the bottom of this cycle up. So we're not always going to, on our continuous improvement cycle and our continuous improvement journey, we're not always going to see an improvement every step of the way. We might actually go backwards a little bit or go down in our cycle, but we never go backwards. So we need to make sure that we are continuously learning more. And that's why we're here today, to learn more, to get some examples of how we can eliminate waste from our project sites. And waste equals dollars. So we all want to be more profitable. We all want our companies and our clients to be more profitable, and the teams that work around us to be more profitable. So how can we come from a point of unawareness to awareness and understanding, competency, and mastery, but we never get to the full mastery point? I always circle back and say, I can learn more, and I can always learn more, no matter what I'm practicing, whether it's something I'm doing with my golf swing or whatever, because God knows I can learn more about my golf swing because it's terrible. So, and I hope that was something that many people can relate to. This is a really important graphic to me, and I know it is to the entire lean construction community. And I did a webinar earlier this year, kind of at the beginning of our COVID-19 pandemic and what was going on in the world. At the core of a lean delivery method is this idea of respect for people. We cannot do anything, especially in this day and age, with what's going on in our country, in the world, with our clients, with the people that are having to work from home and find a new way to do things. We can't do anything successfully unless we look at what's at the center of this circle and the idea of respect for people. We're on the other end of a phone call or a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting. I don't know what's going on in your life. I don't know. I mean, if I'm sitting in front of you, I can kind of gauge maybe how you're doing. But now that we're somewhat separated, we can't do anything unless we have respect for people. We're not going to be successful. We're not going to find ways to generate more profit for our organizations, especially in this time when things seem to be tightening up. We're not going to do any of that unless we have respect for people. This is a very difficult thing that no one in the world thought we'd be going through. And now more than ever, lean tools and principles and thinking is extremely important. And so think about all the other things that happen around the circle. If you have respect for people, can we optimize the whole? Can we look at our project outcomes and say, how can this be great for everyone involved? Not just the end customer, not just one element along the way, not just the general contractor, the trade partners, or the designer, winning an award for something or whatever, but how can we optimize everything for the whole? Connects back into this idea of respect for people. Same thing with the generation of value. We have plenty of times and discussions about value generation. Again, we can't talk about how this something brings value to a project unless we have a focus on what's happening in the center of the circle. Same thing with elimination of waste. That's our big topic today, but it's one of these many things that we're talking about: continuous improvement, focusing on flow. All of these things are interconnected. But I love this graphic, and I challenge everyone: take a screenshot of this, put it on your wall, put it wherever you can see it, and look at it every day and really think about, okay, I got to start my day off with this concept of respect for people. I could do a whole presentation just on that alone, because when we talk about teams reacting quickly to things that are happening in our society, we can't do anything without that. And I can't say it enough. But it's so important, and it's even more important now than it was 6 months ago, a year ago. And just really focus on this aspect and think about it as you go back to your work habits or whatever you're doing past the presentation time that we have today. Really think about that and understand it. Again, this is a kind of a repeat of what the 6 tenets of lean are. Number one being respect for people. I don't need to get into it anymore, but it is the absolute basis for everything we do. It builds that foundation for lean to then take out and bring to other people, bring to our communities of practice. And we're doing we do a lot of presentations across the country. This is the core tenet and concept for the Lean Congress this year in Detroit. The first thing that the organizers talked about was the idea of respect for people. Before we even knew what was going on, what was going to be happening in the world today, we talked about this because we know how important it is. And so I just love the graphic. I love this idea of the handshake. Now maybe we're doing an elbow bump rather than a handshake, but I think the same thing holds true, that we need to be interactive and interacting with people, and we're learning a different way to do that. But we're still talking to people and interacting with them every single day. So just keep that in mind. Is one thing I would say. If there's any takeaway, that's one hugely important thing to take away from today. So let's talk about waste. And look at the definition up there. Waste is any activity that requires time or resources but does not create value for the customer. Couple major key words that are the basis of lean philosophy are in this sentence. The first one, I'll start with the last word in this sentence, is customer. Who is the customer? And when we start to talk about lean thinking, we got to think about who is the customer. So initially you would say it's the person paying for the product at the end of the line, right? The person buying, the owner that's paying for our construction projects is the customer. But when we start to really break down the essence of lean, the customer is anyone that we're delivering a work product to that's next in line. So my customer today might be somebody in my office, somebody that does contracts or invoices or whatever in my office space may be considered my customer because I'm delivering a work product to them. So that idea of customer is essential in understanding who am I handing something off to. The next concept, go backwards from that, is creating value. So the word value is important also. What is valuable? How do I create something that's valuable to the customer? So if I give you a work product, let's say I'm doing an invoice and I'm putting together an invoice package and I hand it to our employee that does invoices and puts that together for our clients, and I hand them a terrible piece of junk product that's going to take them extra time to fix, did I do something that was valuable to that person? No, I'm wasting their time. So there you go. There's our first talk about waste. So because I didn't create something that was valuable to them that they could actually use and just take and do their job with, I created a waste where they were going to have to do something. That highlights the idea of defects and the waste of defects. So we got to think about the term value. that word gets thrown around a lot, talking about value propositions and the concept of value. But really think about it in the essence of, I have a work product that I'm going to hand to somebody else, my customer. It has to be something that's worthwhile, or else I've wasted my time and their time. And then we go to any activity that requires time or resources is waste. There's a lot of statistics out there about the waste in construction. McKinsey did a report in 2017 about waste in construction, and these numbers are staggering. We're talking about billions of dollars a year wasted because we don't have the right answers, we don't have the right information, we don't have the right tools, materials. We're waiting for change orders, we're waiting for RFIs, submittals. The members of our team are not listened to. The list could go on and on. But when you think about it, when you talk about billions of dollars of waste, we can find small little incremental things to help improve on, and that will help drive that number down. So I would challenge you to go back and read the McKinsey report. I think it was in 2017 that talked about waste in the construction industry. And the reason why we're here today is because we all see it. We all know it's out there. But how do we actually go and identify it? And then what tools can we use within our toolbox to help try to eliminate things or ask the right questions? So here are the 8 wastes. You'll see them categorized in different ways on different publications. You can actually create an acronym called downtime, which takes the first letter of each one of these words or a subset of these words and creates an acronym called downtime. But I think the important thing is we'll start to dig into each one of these, and the order that LCI puts them in this presentation is really around the idea of how they can join together. Each one of these joins together from one to the next. So if you have this, you're gonna move to having the wait, and then waiting creates this. So each one of these is done in a specific order. In the LCI presentation, I use the downtime acronym when I'm thinking about memorizing this and living it in my own life because it's easy to remember. So downtime is defects, overproduction is the O, W is waiting, N is non-utilized talent, which is this one here. And then the T is transportation, inventory, motion, and extra processing. So that's how I remember that acronym. But it really, in any sense, take a picture of this, put it on the wall. We have this in our office space where we talk about this on a daily basis of how do we try to find and eliminate waste on our construction sites and in our daily work habits. So a couple key takeaways. The word customer, who is that? Who is that in our world? It's that person that we hand things off to. Let's talk about value, the idea of value proposition or creation of value. If they don't find that it's valuable, we're not doing our jobs correctly. So over or under production. Now this is one that is, people say, like, how do I see overproduction? I mean, what are we talking about when we talk about overproduction or underproduction for that matter? Now, overproduction is something, when you look at an overproduced space, look at all the rebar that is in that photo there. Now, we love our structural engineers. We're not going to badmouth anybody today. That's not what this is about, because I talked about respect for people. But I do like to point out instances where maybe we find where we're not bringing value to the client. And in the case of like this rebar cage, how much rebar is actually required to do the job? Have we overproduced? Have we provided a level 5 drywall finish when that is not really necessary? I had a occupational therapy space once that we were building out. The architect was saying, this needs to be level 5 finish. That's the standard for the client for every wall space inside their facility. And if anyone knows what a level 5 finish is, it takes a lot of labor and material to get a wall to a level 5 finish. This is going to be painted. This is not going to have wall covering or anything else on it. And to me, as the owner's representative, standing there saying, this feels like a waste to me because I feel like we're overproducing. This is an occupational therapy space where we're going to be doing physical therapy. We're going to be banging things against the wall. We're going to have mirrors on a number of the walls are going to be covered with mirrors so we can do our exercises and do our therapies in the correct manner. Why are we then creating a wall level behind this wall at a level 5 finish and spending a lot of time and dollars? So there's an example of an overproduction where we don't really need, the owner doesn't need to pay for something that they're not going to see the value in. An idea of underproduction, they labeled here as missing or unclear information that leads to a RFI. I mean, how many times are we rushing to get our drawings done and we're not coordinated 100%? I really lead that into not utilizing talent, because if we underproduce our drawings and get them out on the street faster than we need to, we didn't utilize the talent of the architects and the design team that we had are sitting around the table, the engineers. We also didn't bring in our trade partners to help us define some of the information that's missing or leading to confusion that leads to RFIs. RFIs, as a general rule of thumb, are a complete waste, unless we're talking about a clarifying RFI for a dimensional issue or something like that. But RFIs are extremely expensive for everyone that is participating in it. And so that is a huge issue when it comes to our construction sites and our construction projects. Those are just a few examples. I could go on just about this one topic, but you can see that each of these leads to waiting. So if we're overproducing because we're going too high level and detailed, we're going to be waiting for information, because we got to continue to, it's like the death by over processing, basically. And then the idea of underproduction is the same thing. An RFI leads to waiting. It leads to the waste of waiting. And we don't even need to talk about waiting, because what we do most of our lives in the construction industry is wait. We're waiting for information all the time. We're waiting for change orders to get approved. We're waiting for a RFI to get answered. We're waiting for a submittal to be reviewed. We're waiting for material to show up on our job site. We're waiting for an elevator to get to the top of the building so we can continue to build. We're waiting in line to use the bathroom because we don't have enough facilities for our workers. We're waiting to get down the elevator to go to lunch. We're waiting in our car to drive home at the end of the day, or whatever. We are waiting for things all the time. So in the idea of the concept of like out of sequence work has always come up as something that people are doing to try to avoid waiting. Well, that creates a waste also. And I challenge most of my teams to not utilize the verbiage of out of sequence work, because I think there's been a negative connotation put on that. And really, when we think about the sequence of work, if we're doing all of our last planner systems correctly and we're really collaborating at a high level, the idea of out of sequence work disappears, because the work is the work. We need to do the work. And maybe we need to recreate and rethink about the sequence of work so that we aren't waiting. Think about the idea of doing anything. Let's say an RFI comes in, right? An example of waiting for an RFI, the plumber asks a question, and I've used this example many times because I think it's a very simple one. The plumber asks a question, it goes to their office, to go to the project manager's office of the general contractor, to the architect, to the engineer, maybe to the owner's representative, most likely, then back through the cycle to get to the general contractor, to get to the plumber. In our general rule of thumb, RFIs took 10 days to review. 10 days of waiting. Now, in this day and age, I think 10 days of waiting for anything is unacceptable. Amazon has taught us that we can get products in a day if we want to. So I think waiting 10 days for an RFI response is a poor way to do things. The other aspect of an RFI is that if we don't actually ask the plumber out in the field to give us a suggested answer that goes to accompany the RFI, we're going to go through that whole 10-day cycle of waiting and then find out that the answer that the engineer gave is not even something that can actually be done on a project site. So we need to learn how to collaborate better so that we aren't waiting for answers, but we're actually giving some of the information back to the customer, in this case, the customer is the engineer, to then return it back to the plumber. And let's collaborate in a better way so that we don't have to wait for bad information. And again, this could lead to overproduction. One trade or another having to work or create a workaround. This is that out of sequence work that I was talking about. So let's talk about unnecessary transportation is the next one. I like to think of this as, this ties in really well to excess inventory, but when we talk about unnecessary transportation on a project site, we're talking about moving materials around a construction site multiple times. In our world, in the union industry that we work in Chicago, workers are now costing the clients over $100 an hour. So it's about $1,000 a day per person on the construction site. To move a pile of drywall that's sitting in the middle of a room so that I can do something else in that room could cost up to $2,000 a day for two people to carry a pile of drywall from one side of the job site to the other, because we didn't think about how we were going to deliver our materials. So we're moving materials around a site. How many people have been on a job site where we have 1,000 gang boxes all over the place and they just get rolled around everywhere, and it feels like they're blocking up our hallways and blocking up our work sites because we need that tool right in front of our face, or else we're not going to be able to do the job. And moving of this material around the site is really an idea of unnecessary transportation. I think of it also as a waste because we could damage that material sitting on site for so long. We could damage that material, and now we have to bring out new material. So having material organized on a job site so that we don't have to move it often is really a key element to not having waste. Unnecessary transportation also has to do with deliveries to our sites, how we coordinate deliveries to our sites, the waiting for that, the crane time that might be necessary to bring a material delivery. And if we don't coordinate well, we're going to have two trucks show up at the same time and want to get material into the site. How do we do that and not have one person wait? We do know that we have to carefully coordinate concrete deliveries so that we don't have concrete sitting there waiting in a truck to be delivered to the site. So that is a well-orchestrated, or usually a well-orchestrated event on a job site, because we can't let the concrete wait and set up inside of a truck. I mean, that's, we don't want to waste that material. So you see here in this example, there's a lot of things that are on wheels. Carts on wheels, great. We can move them around the site much easier. Maybe it takes one person to move all these carts rather than two. But I would look at this as saying, man, we got a lot of inventory here. And that, let's talk about the idea of excess inventory. So that's going to come up later. Right now, we're going to talk about overprocessing. So overprocessing, I have a great example of overprocessing. It's really these unnecessary steps in the process. One of our internal things that we've done at IFS is look at the invoicing process for our clients. So we used to have every invoice go through a number of steps in our office. The president of our company had to see every invoice before it left our office and went to the client, because that's what we thought the client wanted, the customer wanted. When we started to drill down to it, and we asked the customer, does this bring value for us to look at every single invoice at a president level in our office? So not only did the project manager and somebody in our accounting department see it, and maybe the project executive on that project, we also had the president. So we're looking at 4 to 5 people are looking at an invoice, in some cases that are worth $100, $200. We're not talking about drastic financial resources here, or financial impact to the client or risk to the client. So we started to talk about the value of what that review process was doing with the client. The client said, that doesn't bring me value to have all of these great minds thinking about and looking at an invoice of that lesser value. So did was we created the threshold. We said the invoice under a certain dollar threshold does not have to be reviewed by XYZ people. So we're able to free up time and energy and not do the step of over processing. So now we have somebody in our accounting department look at it, review it for completeness, and then we have our project manager approve that invoice and send it through to the client so the client can pay that vendor or that contractor or that trade partner. Much more efficient, cuts out a lot of steps, cuts out a lot of time and bottlenecks, gets the contractors paid sooner. Any great owner's representative wants to pay the people that are doing the work as soon as possible. I don't ever want to hold up payment to anybody, because in this business, we're always paying for things before the work is actually done. We're paying for the work, and then we're waiting as a vendor, we're waiting to get paid from our clients. And so we're extending ourselves out at a great length, and we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, as they say, where we're getting an invoice for paid that's having to pay for something else. So we're always behind on our accounting systems because it takes so long to get paid. So why not cut out some of the steps and not over process this? This statistic here, the average cost to administer an RFI is $3,000 an RFI. I think that actually could go higher if you think about some of the time we spend. I saw an article not that long ago that talked about the need for a 10-day review cycle for an RFI. So people are still writing articles and publishing them in our professional literature that talks about waiting 5 to 10 days for an RFI to be answered and thinking that's okay and acceptable. That's just costing us time and money that we don't have, that our projects can't afford, that our owners don't want to pay for. If we told the clients that these questions, because we didn't take the time to coordinate, it's costing our clients $3,000+ to write for an RFI to be written on their projects, they'd go crazy. They wouldn't find that to be acceptable. It's their money. At the end of the day, we need to think of a better way. This said, according to this, the waste is really led to waiting and unused creativity. And this is a huge one, this idea of unused creativity that we'll talk about. So excess inventory, it really ties into the idea of motion. Excess inventory on our project sites is a huge issue. How many people have been to a project site where we have all of the framing up in the entire space, all the metal studs are up in the whole job site, and we have areas where the studs have been pushed apart and flattened because people walk across them, because that's their path, the least resistant path of travel. How many times have we had piles of rebar outside as we're pouring a foundation wall, and there's tons of rebar covered in mud, buried in the ground, lost forever, that we have to order new materials on? It happens all the time. It drives me crazy to see this. We had a prime example of excess inventory on project sites is when we used to get all of the hardware for all of the doors for an entire building delivered to the job site at one time. Then we would have a carpenter sit in a room and divide up all the hardware on these elaborate shelves that they built to create the hardware room for our project sites. We spent hours and days organizing and getting all this material put in. Now, guess what? We get to do? We get to order material and have the hardware installed on the door before it shows up to the job site. So we've taken the mindset of this hardware room where we organize and set up all these great things and waste all this time. We now have the suppliers doing it for us. We do that with light fixtures. We have ballasts installed. We have all kinds of whips installed on our light fixtures before they show up to our job site. So all we have to do is take it out of the packaging, and we've minimized the packaging that comes to our sites as well. And we can install that light fixture in a much simpler, easier time that eliminates waste. The idea of the large pile of drywall sitting in the middle of a room is excess inventory. It doesn't need to be there. When are we drywalling? And do we need 85 sheets of drywall in a room that we're going to have to work around for the entire rest of the job site? So I talked about that idea of excess inventory, and I talked about the idea of $1,000 per person per day, per worker. So think about this. If I have a pile of drywall sitting in the room and I have two people that need to move it, and let's say they need to move that twice, that costs me, let's say $4,000. How many deliveries can I buy from the drywall supplier for $4,000? I can buy it as many deliveries as I probably need on that job site, and I don't need to move any of the drywall. What a better way to spend our dollars. Because now I've freed up 2 laborers for 2 days, not moving drywall, to do something more useful on this project site and more valuable to the end customer. Moving a pile of drywall around is not valuable to anybody. We're just creating extra work because we have this idea of excess inventory. And it just sits there and it gets damaged. That idea that rebar sitting in the mud, can I actually use rebar that's caked in mud and put it in my concrete wall? What's that going to do to the wall? I mean, that idea of defects is huge. Would I take that last bottom piece of drywall that sat on the job for 2 months, then walked on and stepped on and kicked? Am I going to put that up and use that? No, I just throw it in the garbage. It's waste. Or if I do use it, it's probably going to have a defect in it, and it's going to end up on a punch list somewhere. It's frustrating. It can be frustrating, but a lot of what you found in these first examples is this is really common sense stuff that we're talking about. This is not rocket science. There's no hidden rocket science to any of this. This is a highly educated concept of just using common sense. Unnecessary motion. So really, this is the idea of I walk up this ladder. Oh, wait, I forgot my tool. I need to go back and get it. Or not having tools organized in our gang boxes. The most successful contractors and trade partners that we see have everything organized. When you think about the idea of waste, this really goes back to the Toyota production system and Toyota thinking we need to find a better way to build an automobile. So where can we put the tools in such a way that we're not wasting time looking for them or searching for them? How do we organize our files, like this example here? How do we organize our files in our file server so that we can go find them easily? So we use keyword searches. Do we need 85 versions of that drawing, or do we just need the last one? Do we need to create the historical concept of how we got to the final document, or do we just need to save the final document? How many emails do we get that are repeats of the same thing over and over again? So when I look at unnecessary motion, I look at the idea that we're continually searching for materials, for information. We're looking through the gang box for that particular drill bit that we lost because we just chucked it in at the end of the day and didn't care. We didn't take the time to just put it back in its place. You know, when we buy a set of socket wrenches from Craftsman or whoever we buy that thing from, it is organized and it is labeled and it is down to the detail of where everything goes. When you take that socket out and use it, do you just chuck it back into a box, or do you put it back where it belongs? So the next time you need it, it's there. That's the idea. The same thing happens in my workspace. I got a stapler on my desk. I put it back in the same spot every single time, so I know exactly where it is. I don't have to think about it. I just grab it and go. Common sense stuff here, not rocket science. Defects are they just drive me crazy. I'm sure they drive a lot of people crazy. The biggest concept or word that I can use defects that correlates to defects is the idea of a punch list. We build these elaborate schedules for our construction projects all the time, but then we add in this duration at the end of the job that's called punch list. So we're accepting the fact that we're going to have defects on our jobs, and we're putting a line item on our construction schedule that says punch list. So the idea of a punch list is, and when we're doing punch list work, every single entity on the job that is doing punch list work is losing money by doing punch list work. The architects are losing money because they have to go out to the project site to do the punch list. They have to go out and review the punch list when it's done. They might have to create a new punch list. They may have come out and punched the job too soon. I'm not saying that we shouldn't go and check our work. I'm just saying, why are we finding that it's acceptable that we're going to have defects and that we're building in all this project schedule time to correct our errors and our defects? What if we, as a group, start to think about the idea of customer and the idea of value generation? What if we as a entity, as the entire construction industry, start to think about that? So the framing contractor that's putting up the studs on the job uses a little bit more care to put those studs up properly. Who does that affect? One of their major customers then is the drywaller, who actually, believe it or not, is from the same exact company. So the drywaller is the customer in that line. The drywaller is then putting drywall on a defective wall. So they hurry up, put the drywall up without taking care. They got screw holes that are too deep, not aligned properly, whatever you want to call it. And then who gets that work product when they're done? The taping company. But they're from the same company still. The stud, the framer, the drywaller, and the taping guy are all from the same company. And if the defect started with the person installing the metal studs, continues with the drywaller, continues with the taper, we've now created layers upon layers of errors and defects. Then who gets the wall after the taper does? The painter. And then who gets the major list of punch list items? The painter. How did the painter, in theory, didn't do anything wrong other than painting on a wall that had been touched by multiple people, and just a concept of defects was built in from the start. It's built into our mindset that it's okay to put on our construction schedules 5 to 10 days worth of punch list items. We're okay with defects. Well, how about this? How about when we're building that stud wall and we find that there's an issue, we stop the work and we say, you know what, there's a problem here. Let me try to solve it before I frame every other wall in this job site. How about that? How about we solve our defective problems as we find them? We're not afraid of stopping the work then, fixing it, and doing it right. Let's do that rather than just assume that we're going to have a bunch of defects and it's okay. We've built entire computer programs around the idea of punch list generation and punch list management. It's so frustrating to me. I would love to not have punch lists on my projects if I could. So when I start off my projects with my teams, I say one of the goals should be no punch list. Let's take care of it as we build it. Unused creativity of team members is, if you read the Toyota Way, this was like the 8th waste that was added in during the Toyota production system concept. This is huge. Who do we listen to, or who are we going to lean on when it comes to problem solving? We need to think about a culture of doing this where people can speak up safely, where they can come to us and say, there's a problem with this wall framing. We need to solve it right now before I hand it off to the drywaller, before I hand it off to the taper. This idea of non-utilized talent is massive. We see it when we go to our lean principles of last planner and the pull planning concept. We're leaning on the people that are the last planners. Those are the people who are utilizing their talent now. Our superintendents in this concept become facilitators and not dictators. Our project's major overall project schedule is a guidepost for us and a framing concept of how we're going to do the project. When we get down to the nitty-gritty of who's doing what every single day, we're driving it to the team members that are there, and we're utilizing their talents. They are allowed to speak up, and we have to listen to them as leaders. We can't ignore what they say because they're bringing great ideas to the table. So, which of the following is an example of waste? A, B, C, so punch list, redlining, decisions not being made, all of the above or none of the above. I think we'll probably find, Eileen, this is a pretty quick consensus answer, hopefully.
Well, we'll see. We've got some. Well, you were quite adamant about some of these, so we have some.
You think so?
Yeah. So we have some varying answers, but there, of course, is a
Okay.
front runner. Um, let's see. So I do want
I
to
hope there's
ask.
one that no one picked. Yeah, go ahead, Heather.
I do want to ask really quickly. Which category do you think we can classify communication waste in?
Communication waste.
Communication
I mean,
waste.
it can. I think communication waste. So you're talking about? Are you thinking like emails, text, all that stuff that we get
Emails, text,
bombarded with every day?
meetings,
Yeah.
I guess, even that yeah, meetings.
So I would say the first one and the most important is non-utilized talent. So when I think about sitting in a meeting with all these great minds together, if I haven't given those people something to do before they get to the meeting, the homework to prepare for the meeting, then why am I having the meeting in the first place? And then if I don't have it as an outcome to that meeting, I don't have a to-do list walking out of that meeting to then have everyone go and do their work to follow up for the next week's meeting. If I don't have that ball in court, due dates and everything else, I'm not utilizing the talent. So that's where communication waste comes in. Pick up the phone and call somebody is much easier than writing 10 emails back and forth. So I think non-utilized talent is one of the top things. I think waiting is the other one. Having respect for the fact that meetings need to start on time and need to end on time. And we find that a lot of people are putting agendas out now that have time frames associated with different topics so that we know we've thought out and planned out our meeting so that we don't put content in that's going to take 2 hours when we only have an hour. So I think waiting is the other one, but non-utilized talent is huge because we're going to waste a lot of people's time if we have really well thought out the meeting or the email chain or whatever we're doing. I think texting is actually great because we can get a lot of things done in the middle of what we're doing with a simple text to somebody.
We're going to leave the poll open for a couple more seconds really quickly. Someone wrote in that if you sent info to the wrong person, that it would be transportation. What do you think about that?
Could be transportation. Yeah. Because you're either if you're copying the wrong people or you're copying too many people. I think it could be it's actually probably more likely over processing than transportation.
Okay.
Because you're over or under processing. If I send a millwork drawing only to the millworker and not to the electrician, I've under processed that particular document because the electrician needs to know what's going on with the millwork on the project site, believe it or not. And this is something I learned early on in my career is I didn't send it to the electrician and I got them barging into my trailer saying, what the heck?
Right.
Well, they need to know everything that's going on the project site because they're putting they have to coordinate everything with all the electrical outlets we have and all the data drops we have now and everything else. So I really think it's either over or under processing more likely than transportation is what I would classify that as.
All right, we're going to close the poll and share the results. Let me get you that 87% said all of the above. 7% said decisions not being made. 5% said traditional punch list process, and we had a 1% tie, I have to tell you, John, with redlining, design drawings, and none of the above.
None of the above.
None of the above.
I have to go back and get on my soapbox again about.
I was going to say, I don't think you were passionate enough about those punch list.
I don't. Was I? I wasn't.
Yeah, right, I guess not. No. All right. Well, we're going to hide these results and let John get on with his presentation.
Okay. Excellent. All right. So this is typically a video that we would show here, but because of technology, we don't want to bog down the system. So I took this slide, I took a video and I made screen captures, and we can run through this pretty quick, but this was courtesy of KHS&S Contractors. And what it really is outlined to show you is what's happening here. So we have a project site and we're installing wood along this soffit here. So we have 2 workers right now, one up on the scaffold with a ladder next to it. We have another worker doing some cutting and some measuring and things like that. So he's waiting up here for a piece to be cut by this worker and brought to him. He's waiting. He's just standing there doing nothing. Just by the way, this video runs for 1.5 minutes. And in that 1.5 minutes, they install one piece of wood. Okay. So I'm going to show you this, and then I'm going to give you an example of how we can see and eliminate this waste and maybe do things a little bit better. So that's the idea of this. So this guy's waiting up here while this guy's doing his work. Now he's decided that it's time to walk down the ladder. So we have now created excess motion, or a motion process where, and you think about it, there's a safety factor that comes into this too. If I'm walking down a ladder, up and down the ladder all day long, I have a potential where I could fall and hurt myself. And I really don't want our employees and our workers on these project sites to be hurt. It is horrible as an owner to know that people were hurt on your project sites. So there's some excess motion happening. Now we have transportation. Now we enter a third worker into the process, carrying over a piece of wood, because the guy that came down the ladder couldn't, I guess, go get it himself, even though he's got wood laying on the ground that he's working over the top of. So we have one guy here supposedly cutting wood. We have another guy carrying a piece of material from somewhere else rather than picking it up from one of these piles. And then we have this guy that came off the ladder waiting to cut the wood. This is pointing out inventory. I just mentioned that to us. So now that other guy went away. This guy is still looking at cutting a piece of wood, I guess, and this guy is now getting ready to cut this piece of wood. But look at how he's standing over this material. This is a finished product, and we're standing over the top of it, potentially stepping on it, damaging it. What are we doing here? Why would we do this? Why would we work like this? And look at all this stuff that's cut here. In theory, these are all pieces that have been cut and sitting on the ground ready to be installed, but we haven't decided to install them yet. Now we have another guy. We have one guy standing behind the other guy. So now this is where we get into non-utilized talent, or the unused employee creativity, because one person's now watching another person possibly cut the piece of wood. So this person's job, standing behind the other guy, is not really beneficial to him or to the company or to the client or to the end customer, anybody, because they're just standing there watching. And we do need supervision, but this is not really a supervision aspect that we're talking about right now. This is somebody that's really doesn't have a lot of useful activity on the project site. And can we take I'm not ever suggesting that we get rid of manpower on construction sites. We need all three of these workers, but we need to assign them jobs and tasks that are productive and that are utilizing their skills and abilities. And this is not it. Let's go to the next slide. Now we got this thing. When you watch the video, he actually moves the whole sawhorse over, because as he was cutting, he was going to hit this column that has finished work on it. This is a fireproof column. It has finished work, and he was going to bang into it. And it looks like there's actually a mark next to that where it says, where the letters are, that looks like a piece was banged on that column that somebody's going to have to go back and now repair or replace. So we created a defect for somebody else to come fix, because our work site has not been managed properly. Here's our supervisor now coming over. Classic supervisor, hands in the pockets, staring at the guys working. This guy's still cutting something over there, and then over processing. So what has this guy been doing all this time? Is he cutting these pieces for the other worker to then hand to him, or what's he been doing this entire time while we've been trying to cut this one piece of wood? So the question is, do you see some overproduction? Now we have our third guy entering back into the picture, and we finally get to the installation of the wood. That's where we've added value to the end customer. So a minute and a half, one piece of wood, 3 workers. Remember, that's $100 an hour per worker standing there. This guy's still standing there doing something, and we have one piece of wood installed. So I throw a poll question up there that just says, what improvements can we make to the process? Can we move the tools closer to the work area? Can we move materials closer to the work area? Can we create a better workflow with teamwork? And then all of the above, or none of the above. So I would hope that this becomes kind of a clear winner as well. It's kind of funny, when I was preparing this and I was talking to my 15-year-old son about the idea of what I was doing today. He's like, what are you talking about? Waste, like garbage that you throw in the garbage can? I was like, no, waste, like the time we spend doing things that we don't need to do. And then I started to point out a bunch of things in his own life that he does that, number one, drive me crazy as a parent, and number two, that are wasteful. He comes upstairs to go to bed at night, and he walks in his room, puts his phone on his charger, goes to the bathroom, but then he's like, oh, wait, I forgot my water so I can take my medicine. He walks back in his bedroom, gets his water, goes back in the bathroom. And he's like, oh, wait, I forgot my clothes. I need to go back in the bedroom to get my clothes to go to take a shower. And then he finally gets done with all that and goes to bed. And I was like, Johnny, why don't you just do this? Why don't you go in your room, plug your phone in, get all the stuff you need, go in the bathroom, do your thing, and then bring your medicine out to your room, take your medicine, and go to bed. You've done your trip. Now you've done this trip one time instead of 4. And he's like, wow, okay. Now I can see that. We talked about that earlier in the day, a couple of days ago. And then when I called him down for dinner that same night, he came down immediately. And I'm like, holy cow, what happened? I usually have to call your name 5 times. How did you respond so quickly? Maybe it sunk in. I don't know. Maybe I just got lucky one night, because I'm sure when I see him this weekend, it'll probably be back to the same old. But there's a prime example of the minuscule items of waste that we could save and use our time more wisely.
I'm on mute.
Eileen,
now
do we
I'm
have
going to go ahead and close this poll, yes, and share the results for everybody. So we had 80% of people that said all of the above, 19% of people that said create a better workflow with teamwork, 1% said move tools closer to the work area, and then we had that same 1% that said none of the above. I'm wondering about that 1%.
All right. That 1%, they're just here to like be the devil's advocate.
I think
really,
so.
do I need to do anything different, you know?
Well, there's always, we always need a devil's advocate.
We always have to have somebody questioning what we're doing. That's the beauty of
continuous
what we
improvement.
Do.
Yes.
Exactly.
So give it back to John.
All right. So let's go again. This is typically a video that we watch to show an improvement in what KHS and S have done. But let's just talk about, and I've highlighted some of the ways that they're eliminating waste. So here we have, this example runs for 1.5 minutes, typically in the video. And what we end up finding in this 1.5 minutes is we install 4 pieces of wood, not 1. So we've quadrupled our production by building a scaffolding system and having 2 workers on that scaffold. So the tools are now closer to the work area. So we don't have what I would call over processing, where we have, or excess motion, where we're moving up and down that ladder, we're potentially risking injury. So we move tools closer to the work area. We have 2 saws up here, one for this guy, one over here. We have all of the other tools. You see this pneumatic hose here for the nail gun, and we have a tool bag up here on the actual scaffold. Everything they need is now right at their fingertips. Beautiful. So there's one guy cutting, one guy installing. No excess motion. There's no up and down the ladder. There's no risk for injury. There's no third guy bringing materials over and standing over a work product that is maybe finished, maybe not finished. It's all right here. So with one guy cutting over here and one guy installing. Now we have no inventory. So think about it. This guy's now cut the material, slid it over. In the video, you see him slide the piece over, and this guy grabs it, and he goes back and does his work. It's beautiful. Now, one of the things I would challenge the team in the first example was go to these workers and say, what can I do to make your job safer and easier? And my hope would be that they come up with ideas like this. Hey, what if we build a scaffold and put our tools up there, and we could just work along this entire line without ever having to change our work environment? They can build this entire soffit from this set of scaffold. We can probably do this whole thing in less than a day. It's beautiful. So we have no inventory now. We don't have a pile up of material. This guy cuts it, hands it off. This guy installs it. They're working together as a team. So you can see here's the handoff. This guy cut a piece, and he's ready to put it in the pile while this guy's installing a piece. Great teamwork, utilizing talent, utilizing the capabilities of these 2 workers. Now, what happened to that third worker? That third worker is probably off doing something else that is creating value for the customer. It's creating end value for the customer, the client. That's what we like to see. That's what we want to see. We don't want to see the fact that these guys another third guy would be standing up on this platform doing nothing. That would be a waste of talent. So we're working together as a team. I love it. Last item is, there's quality checks. So you see this guy inspecting this piece of wood, and in the video, he's dusting it off, cleaning it off, making sure that it's right. He's got a belt sander there to kind of sand it down if there's rough edges or whatever. We're doing quality checks as this stuff is happening, right before installation. We're not allowing ourselves to say it's okay to put it on the punch list. I'm going to go back to that punch list thing. We're not okay with building this massive punch list. Let's not build in defects into our work. This guy is utilizing his talent, saying, no, I'm going to give my friend here a great work product, no defects, so that he can come and install it in this space without an issue, without problems. It's beautiful. So kind of as we wrap up here, and we left some time for questions and things, what ideas or actions are you going to take back today to your work environment, to your office, to your construction site, to your house? How are you going to implement lean in maybe a slightly different way? When we do these Gemba walks and we go on the project sites, are you going to be able to look and ask different questions to the workers that are out there? Because they really take a lot of pride in what they do. And if you go up to a drywaller or you go up to that carpenter and say, what can I do to make your job a little bit easier, a little bit safer? And then you listen to them and you actually implement what they suggested. Now we've created a powerful tool. We've created this idea of respect for people. We've created the idea that their thoughts and ideas are extremely important. And guess what? We're probably going to come up with some really fantastic ideas that will eliminate waste and create more profit. Now, does profit find its way downstream to the workers in the field? It can find its way down there if you have a bonus program, et cetera. But the other challenge I put out to teams is, man, if I work faster and smarter, I'm going to be done with my job. I'm going to work myself out of a job. The flip side to that coin is, okay, work yourself out of this job so I can give you the next one. Clients that see their teams working in a lean, efficient manner are more willing to give projects to those teams again. And I'm not just talking about companies. I'm talking about the individuals that work on those teams. I have a set of projects that I've been working on with another project manager in our office for a while now, and it's a bunch of smaller retail health clinics that happen in these strip malls. And it's so powerful to understand the fact that we negotiated with the team and said, here's our team. We're moving forward with the team. General contractor, trade partners, engineers, architects, everyone's on the team. And we're finding that we're not only are we having the same companies do the work, we're having the same individuals move from one project site to the next. So now what we've implemented on job number 1 can be taken to job number 20, and I have the same workers. They've created a bond between themselves. What a great way to build a respectful team that can run it at a very high efficiency and can eliminate waste from what we're doing in our everyday lives. LCI has a number of ways to continue our education, from unawareness to awareness. Here are a bunch of different things we could do in a classroom. We can do them on an e-learning setting. We can do webinars like this one. I would ask you and implore you to go to the Lean Construction website, explore these ideas, and really get into it. There are Lean coaches that LCI has worked with that are across the country to help teams out with this kind of thing. I mean, I've read all of these books. They're wonderful because they're short in their chapters, so they're easy to read a chapter at a time. But pick them up. These are LCI produced publications. I start with the Transforming Design and Construction one all the time. It has definitions for basically everything we talk about. Get involved in your local communities of practice around the country. There are, I think, 28 of them across the country. We're doing great things all the time, even in a virtual setting right now. We're doing virtual lean coffees. We're doing virtual events because we can't get together and meet in person, but we're continuing the cycle of education and bringing people together. The Lean Congress is slated every year in October. A great way to, again, gather information in a very large setting. The design forum happened in May. This is something that we do on an annual basis also. Again, this is geared more towards designers, owners, those collaborators that maybe feel left out of the construction process or feel like there's not a spot at the table. But if they aren't in the room, designers, owners, with the contractors leading this entire charge as a group, we're not going to be successful. Here's our website, leanconstruction.org. I would ask you to go visit. You can find all of these and more information there. The e-learning idea is a great one. This module is an element of that. You can earn credits. Becoming a corporate member gives you a lot more ways to save on the idea of the registration fees, the events that we're doing in our local communities of practice. We're always looking for new people to join up at our local communities of practice. There's an entire map on the website that shows you all of them. Get involved. If you're interested in this, get involved, be involved. We're always looking for people to help out, because the more people we get to talking about this, the better off this industry is going to be. And there is me again. So here's my contact information again. I think we left about 15 or so minutes for Q&A.
Yep.
So let's Eileen, let's go to it. I'm here to answer whatever questions are asked.
Well, we've got some great questions in the questions box. I do want to remind everybody, go ahead and put those in the questions box. We're also going to do something called a plus delta. And for those of you who are not familiar with the term, this is how we get our feedback for continuous improvement. Pluses are things you liked about the presentation, you thought were explained well, you thought were done well. And deltas are kind of like wishes, things you think we could change, things you wish we would have explained in more detail, you wish we would have covered it all. So please put those pluses and deltas into the questions box. We want to make sure our webinars and educational offerings are exactly what it is that you guys want to listen to and hear about. So one of the questions we have is if you could clearly define once again the distinction between processing versus production wastes.
Okay. So the idea of over-processing, over-processing is really this, and I look at it as steps in a workflow, is over-processing in my mind. That's one real clear example of over-processing. So how many checks do we need on an item before we can approve that item? Do we need 3 architects to look at it in the office before they stamp a set of drawings? Can we drive accountability to the people that are in charge of their job? You know, so if I'm constantly looking over your shoulder, micromanaging you, I am not utilizing your talent properly. And at some point, why do I need that employee if all I'm going to be doing is doing their job on top of them doing their job? That's an idea of over-processing. So look at your processes internally and say, how many people are actually touching a document, piece of paper, whatever you want to call it, and look at how can I make this more efficient and bring value to the client. That's over-processing. Under or overproduction really comes to the concept of designing something at a higher level than what the client is expecting to pay for or really needs or wants. So if I'm going to put in like this example of drywall to a very high level of finish. The other thing I talked about was like with my son was about this idea of like cabinetry. So if I can build a piece of cabinetry out of plastic laminate and it's an acceptable product for the space that it's going in, why do I need to build it out of a solid wood core and make it look really nice and fancy when it's going in a storage room? So we find that we got to look at the use of the products that we're specifying so we don't overproduce. We're not going to put a sheet vinyl floor with flash cove, which is expensive and time consuming, in a room that doesn't require it. So we have to look at, that's an overproduction element. Underproduction is the same thing. We didn't produce our drawings to a high enough level of detail. And so now it's going to create RFIs and issues when we get to the field. That's underproduction. So does that kind of spell it out a little bit?
I think so. If you need a little bit more information, go ahead and write it into the questions box, and I'll make sure to ask John for a little more information based on what it is that you write
Mm-hmm.
in. John, I know that you talked about
Mm-hmm.
this a little bit in regards to the hammer thing and the stapler that you mentioned, but we have, and I know this is a
Mm-hmm.
whole other webinar that you do for us, the Intro to Lean Project Delivery, but I think it's a good idea.
Right.
And one of the questions is, what are the lean tools available to eliminate each waste? Could you go into some of them? I think 5S would be one, and I
Yeah.
know there are some
So
others
so
as well.
5S is one. Right. 5S is one, and I don't remember all the S's, but it's like sort and other things. But the idea of 5S is to have a clear working and workspace. So get rid of the clutter. Get rid of the clutter out of get rid of the piles of paper on your desk. You haven't looked at them in 10 years, so throw them away, Put your stuff in a space that is clearly demarcated and defined. So there's actually a book that says everything I learned about lean, I learned in the first grade. So when you think about first grade, everything is clearly labeled. It's marked with a name of where it goes, where that tool or where that thing goes. So on my desk, I put my stapler back in the same place every single time so that when I need it, I can go grab it without thinking about it because I'm still continuing on with what I'm doing. I think we found that when we get to working at home, we've had to change our work environment a little bit. And we probably have become less efficient at what we did unless we started to set up our home offices like our work offices. Because we're used to it. We're used to where the second screen is on our TV, on our laptop or whatever. We're used to the chair we sit in. So we need to be cognizant of that as we set up our home offices to match our work offices so that we don't have to think about how do I go to work every day. So 5S is one example of that. When we talk about the last planner system or pull planning, I really look at that as non-utilized talent and solving the problem of non-utilized talent. Because the last planners, by definition, are those that are the ones that are responsible for doing the work. So if I can get the electrical foreman up off his butt and say, these are the things I'm doing this week to move the project forward, and he or she is taking accountability for that activity, now I've utilized their talent and I've gotten rid of the idea of waste. If I have a superintendent continually telling everybody, you're going to be here today with 5 people, and the electrician looks at him or her and says, wait, I only need 3 people. Why are you asking me to bring 5? Well, more people doesn't always solve the problem. That could create a wasteful system as well. So last planner system is a great one for non-utilized talent. When we think about like inventory and things like that, really those ideas there, I think, are really drive to common sense and good communication with people. And we talked about the idea of waiting and how we do things in meetings with agendas and things like that. So it's another one, just a lean tool when it comes to being organized is a perfect example of that.
So the rough translation of the 5S Japanese terms are sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain.
Yeah, there you go. I can't always remember that.
You know what? I can't either. I had to quickly look them up. So
it's a Google search on that one.
Google is my
for
friend.
Me too. So
yes, exactly.
Google is everyone's friend. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
But we see that. So we see organizations have competitions where they're going to do a 5S competition where you organize your workspace, you organize the storage room, the storage closet to be better suited to get rid of all the junk that you have back there. We find that it can be a friendly competition even within our own companies about who did the best job of organizing their desk or their setup.
There are some great videos out on YouTube, John, if you type 5S into the search engine about 5S and companies that have done it and what they've done and things like that, especially around healthcare and some others. So that's another place to look for some resources. All right. Yeah. So our next question is, in specific environments, roles and responsibilities prevent certain workers from doing anything but their specific jobs. They end up waiting. Painters can't do what carpenters do. Carpenters can't do what painters do. Electricians have to wait for carpenters, etc. Procedures and even union rules can create waiting. How do you plan around that effectively?
I mean, it's a good question. It's a challenge that we face on every single project site we have. because there are certain work rules that are specific to a trade. Where we really find that we can reduce the waiting and optimize the flow is to use our last planner system. So we have a whole series of lessons on the idea of last planner, the last planner system, and pull planning. So if I can get the group around the table, they're each doing their defined work method and trade, but they figure out how to work together in a better way, then we're not waiting. I know I can't do your job. I shouldn't have to do your job. You're going to do your job, but your job may take 3 days, and I want to get on the site sooner than that. But if you're clear with me that your job takes 3 days, but I can start my job 2 days after you've started yours, and we create this overlap because we have a nice flow now on the project site, I now eliminate that idea of waiting, and I've created a collaborative environment for people to work in. So using the tools of the last planner system is a great way to combat what happens with our union trades that are only allowed to do one thing. You don't even have to do the idea of speaking up and hearing their voice necessarily, but I challenge those that are our superintendents and the ones that are out there directing work in the field to become facilitators of a good conversation between trades rather than a dictator. And what superintendents that really buy into this process find, their jobs become, their talent is now utilized in a better way, where they're not babysitters, highly paid babysitters. They become problem solvers and leaders of teams. That's what they signed up for when they wanted to do this job. You know, it gives me chills. I think about like people actually being able to do the job that they were asked, that they signed up for. So become a facilitator of good conversations between the different trades, and eventually you won't even have to facilitate anymore. People are just going to do it on their own and learn how to work together.
Okay, I do want to remind people to please put those plus deltas into the questions box. We really want that feedback for continuous improvement. John, do you have data showing the efficiency gains from the increasing trend in modular construction, or do you know where people can find that? I know there's the Modular Building Institute, but I don't know of anywhere else that might be available. Do you?
No, not offhand. I'd have to do a little research. I know that I think that we're definitely finding that organizations are asking for more modular construction. I would also challenge the team to look at modularity, not just in a prefab building, but we've been prefabbing things on project sites for a long time. The millwork that comes to the site is prefab. The ductwork that comes to the site is prefabbed in some circumstances, in some ways. So are the light fixtures and everything else. So we've been prefabbing for a long time.
Yeah, you mentioned
challenge the team to go find new ways to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean we've been doing this for a while. We've been prefabbing things. So I don't have specific data at my fingertips that I could say, but I know it's out there where people are finding that there are benefits to it. Look at like what happened in China when they go, as this pandemic was happening, we're building a hospital in 10 days. Now that hospital was built as a temporary facility, and it had to be designed. So the design was happening prior to the actual construction element. But if we can think about things in a sequence and organize our flow better, we can come up with great ways to do things in a short amount of time. So that's a simple thing. And that got a lot of press, what was that, in January and February, where this was happening in real time, and we could watch it on YouTube and everything else, where we could watch these videos happening on a daily basis. And it was amazing to see the number of people that were involved, the number of pieces of equipment and materials that were involved to build a facility in a short period of time to help, heal people that were sick.
Okay. Our next question is, which is the best way to identify the waste in our project site?
Well, there's a skill set there's a Japanese word that we call gemba, which is go to the work. And when we do our gemba walks, which is really, when we teach gemba in LCI and in the lean world, we teach people to just how to look at a project site a little differently. My challenge to people that are on webinar would be, don't be afraid to ask questions. So when you go out to the site, if you see something that looks odd, ask somebody about it. Don't be afraid to have a conversation with the person doing the job and ask them why they're doing what they're doing. Now, we got to be respectful of that. We don't want to challenge them and say, what are you doing? Think about how you ask the question and say, can you explain to me why you're doing the job the way you're doing it? And is there a better way what can I do to help make that easier for you? Are you waiting for information? Or do you know who you're handing this product off to? Talk about the idea of customer and to them, and talk about the idea of value to them. And what we're finding is that those that are out there know that things are wasteful. You can't just call a project a lean project and hope it's not going to be wasteful. There are plenty of horror stories of organizations that have done a lean transformation. And the people that work there are like, man, this is crazy because it takes 10 times longer for us to get an answer. Well, then we're not doing it right. So I think allowing people to speak up and hear their voice is a great way to see the waste, understand it, and try to help solve it. Just open communication with people and allowing that, we put the suggestion box out there. Don't just have people drop ideas in the suggestion box and never read them. Actually listen to what people are saying and try to respond to them and show them that you're listening and make substantial changes. Even if it's little tiny things, they can be substantial changes.
Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left for questions. Our next question is, how do you address apathy amongst, and we're going to say trade partners specifically, the painters and the plumbers, when pointing out waste or asking for input?
Yeah, so I think it starts with a leadership role. For me, it starts with a leadership role. I've been on project sites where the superintendents or a foreman or somebody has been, pretty negative, and so what happens is that permeates them throughout the entire. If they don't care, if the owner doesn't care, if the owner's not present, architects aren't present, the leaders of the job aren't present, then why should I care? And so I think the first challenge with us, most of us are probably leaders that are on this call today. Be present. Go out and be present, and don't be afraid to get into the weeds. Get your hands dirty when you need to, and show people out there that you are in it as much as they are. You're not sitting on your high horse and on your throne somewhere. You're in it with them all the way through. Lead by example. So don't just expect them to automatically be open and honest and tell you everything about what's going on, what's wrong with their job or whatever. That's probably not going to happen right away. Build a culture of trust and accountability by treating them with respect. I mean, it sounds simple. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to do that. This is our job as leaders in our continuing education and our journey of continuous improvement. How do we become better leaders? And how do we communicate with people in a better way? That's our job to do, to make their jobs better, to get rid of that apathy
Our next question is, what examples or incentives have you seen put in place to reduce punch list items?
So we do, we actually had a little kind of contest on what I would call the prefab of the week thing on a project site that we did. So this was, everyone brought their ideas for prefabrication every week, and we gave out a little award for those that were doing good things when it came to prefabrication. The idea of prefabrication is I'm building something in a enclosed environment that is, more controlled, and so the quality should be built in. So there was one small idea, just every week people would vote on it. Certain trades are going to have better outcomes than others. Another way to just incentivize that would be to maybe we just host a little party at the end of the job based on the quantity of punch list items we do have or don't have. And we give ourselves goals and we measure them. The thing I would challenge the team is I'm bringing out my engineers and architects on a weekly basis. I want them to get to know the carpenters and electricians and mechanical trade partners that are out there. And I want them to work together and walk through the sites together and identify things that are issues and solve them as they're building them. So that leads to that level of accountability on both sides, to take the time to walk through and do a real walkthrough, talk to people, And maybe what we do is we have a dashboard that says, hey, these 5 things were eliminated this week, and post those wins on the board somewhere and say, we eliminated 5 punch list items because these 5 conversations happened. Put it up there for everyone to see. Be transparent with it. Don't hide that information. Celebrate those things.
So we have 3 questions left, but about a minute or 30 seconds. So I've got time for one, but the other 2 are going to go directly to the presenter. John, I'm putting you on the spot, so he'll be able to get in contact with you directly because they are from one person. So
excellent.
I have a question here from LCI Cutter that says it's a great presentation.
All right.
Respect is the key, evidently, in Cutter, but there is a question. Snags and punch list items, are they one and the same over here? Over there, they refer to snags as defects, whereas punch list items are uncompleted items. So what, are they the same over here, or how do we view punch list versus snags versus any of that?
We don't actually have anything called snags. We don't use that terminology here. I think what we probably find is that they're just general defects, or when we do a field report, usually things come out on the field report, observations from our architects and engineers that observe things on a field report. Those observations then are sent out to the project team to identify what they've observed and what things need to be maybe addressed as issues. We call them, I would think we'd probably call them issues or things like that here in the States, as far as not snags. But what I would say is that's a working punch list as the project moves forward. So take the snags idea, fix them as you go, and uncompleted items, again, I would say, why am I doing a survey of a project to see that there's uncompleted items? If I trust the team, we got to build this level of accountability and trust. If I trust the team to do their job, yes, I have to have a check and balance there. And that's some of what the punch list is for. But what I find the punch list is for is defects a lot of the time, rather than work that wasn't completed, and even work that wasn't completed, I would say is a defect. I think we're bringing people out there too early in the process and everything else. So I think you can view them in the same philosophy of work together as a team, identify those items, and try to solve them in place at the time that they're presented, rather than waiting to solve them later.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. LCI would like to thank John Zahara from Integrated Facility Solutions and all of you for attending. We look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Again, I want to remind you that everybody will be receiving a copy of the recording, a copy of the slide deck, and a certificate of attendance. So thanks again for attending, everyone, and have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.